decision. I'll face the sunny side head on. I had a vision of what it might be like.
Hey everybody, welcome to our very special episode, Thursday special guest we have in studio is Tawny Lara. She is a host of Recovery Rocks podcast, and she has a book called Dry Humping. Hi, Tawny.
I love that title.
I love that title. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. We know you're on the East Coast, and we're out here on the West Coast. And,
yes.
So let's talk about. I want to talk about your book, Dry Humping. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's about?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I quit drinking, the thought of dating, let alone hooking up without alcohol, really scared the hell out of me. So this is the book that I needed when I was newly sober. I mean, this is the book that I needed when I was still drinking. Let's be real. But this is definitely the book that I needed. And, it's structured. It's in 3 parts. The first part is about, being single and dating. The middle part is about sex and figuring out, like, reconnecting with your body and your sexuality without alcohol. And then the last part is about being in a relationship. It's about communication and setting boundaries and advocating for your own pleasure and all of these things that, we were not taught, especially as women. That I really dig in as a journalist. It's not a memoir. It's a journalistic perspective, an investigation on the role that liquid courage plays in our love lives.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been sober?
A little over 8 years now, November of 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, like, your story, what was your drinking like? Because I think that, we talk about, I was on Tawny's show. Mm-hmm. I think you know that. And it was awesome. That's a great podcast that she does with her partner Lisa, who wrote a book called Girl Walks Out of a Bar. So they both have books about about sobriety. And we on this show talk a lot about addiction and this is kind of an intervention on Lynette. No, I'm just kidding.
That's why I'm here. Okay, I understand now.
No, but I think Lynette, I think that for a lot of women, even if they don't have a alcohol problem, rely on alcohol to date and just to feel comfortable. And some of the things that you mentioned just about advocating for your, your own pleasure and figuring out what works for you. I think that's difficult. I think some of the reasons we drink is to avoid that, is to feel more comfortable, is to feel more like dissociated from our bodies, right? So that we can,
I think a lot of
feel
people
more sexy and see ourselves as more like crazy in bed. And I have a lot of friends in sobriety who told me that back when they were drinking, even, married friends, they were like, oh, that's how we were kind of crazy and, use sex toys and stuff. And then as soon as you're sober, you're like, oh God, I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I think your book, and it's really important. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate you saying all of that. It's 100% correct. I'll tell you my story in a bit. I'll just add on what you said.
Yeah.
Initially I wrote this book it was written through a lens for people in recovery like myself. But the more that I researched liquid courage and alcohol with sex, dating, and relationships, I realized that this is not just a people in recovery conversation. This is a conversation for anyone who dates, anyone who's in a relationship, anyone who drinks alcohol or has consumed alcohol, to, rely on that liquid courage to get through a difficult conversation or try something new in the bedroom. So it's written through more of a sober, curious lens. I am not anti-alcohol. I'm not a prohibitionist by any means. It really is.
I am. I'm trying to bring back prohibition.
We need people fighting on both sides, Stefanie. So But it's, yeah. So I wanted to add that. So like if people are listening and they're just like, oh, but I'm not sober, it's totally fine. So, I was a stereotypical party girl bartender back in the day. I mean, it was you picture like this young girl going woo, dancing on the bars and all that stuff. That was me. I was either bartending or on the other side of the bar or dancing on it.
Where were you living? Were you in New York?
I was not in New York. I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a small town in Texas, and I moved to New York June of 2015 to pursue writing, and I got sober in November of 2015. So
wow,
that was none of this was part of the plan, But I tell you that I come from the bartender party girl background to really paint that picture and just show that was my whole world. That was where my friends were. That's where my hookups were. That's where my romantic and sexual relationships began and ended. Let's be real. The bar was my whole life. It really, being a drunk party girl was my whole identity. And I never thought to question my relationship with alcohol because I hung out with all my friends drank the same way that I did. But once I moved to New York, that's really when it began to shift. I hung out with people, like I quit the bar scene. I was taking writing classes and yoga and just like, I was still drinking, but it was very different because I was hanging out with people who had like one or two drinks. And I was like, what is this? These people just stop after two? Like, what are they doing? But there was one day in particular that I'm sitting in a pub with some friends, and we were talking about why we moved to New York and how we don't have enough time to do the things we wanted to do here. Mine was writing, and I'm just like, I don't have enough time to write. And then something just really clicked when I left the pub. I was like, I just spent 4 hours in a pub talking about how I don't have time to write. Maybe there's something there. So, my 30th birthday was around the corner, and I gave up alcohol for a full year, and I started a blog, and the blog held me accountable for not drinking, and the not drinking held me accountable for the writing. And it was just this really beautiful accountability, very symbiotic. Again, this is 2015. We didn't have words like sober curious back then, but that's definitely what I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, that year comes to an end, and my friends are like, are you going to drink again? And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I'm good. Like that year without alcohol, I was blogging regularly. I was starting to do freelance work. I got into therapy, and I really started to unpack why I was drinking the way that I drank. I was like, I was not attracted to alcohol in the same way. So yeah, I have not drank since, and it's been over 8 years now. And, the book really came out of that whole chapter of my life of, drinking and having drunk hookups, and then getting sober, and then dating and learning how to have sex again.
Especially coming from somebody who didn't have some kind of rock bottom moment where you're like, oh my gosh, drinking is going to ruin my life. I've got kids, some things like some people have. It came out of you just made a decision, which is great. But I'm saying, like, for those of us who are like, yeah, I need to make that decision, but like, oh my God, trying to date without alcohol, that I feel like that would drive a lot of people back to drink. Like, how was it, especially if you were coming from that's how you operated,
right,
with alcohol helping you with that? Like, tell us about the first time, did you try to date sober guys? Were you super uncomfortable the first time? I want to hear the nitty gritty.
Yes. And yes. I didn't necessarily start dating sober people. I realized that I was okay with dating people who drank occasionally. If you're getting wasted, I can't date you.
Right.
If like people smelling like alcohol, that was really tough for me, or kissing if they smell like whiskey and cigarettes, it was like so triggering. But if you're having a glass of wine while we're sharing a pizza, that was fine with me. And everyone has their own version of that. I was comfortable with that in the same way I was able to stop drinking alcohol. Some people need medical assisted detox treatment. Some people need like a true rock bottom moment. So I definitely acknowledge that. But for me, I think because I come from the bar scene, I still just feel comfortable around alcohol. It's just not for me anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do too. My husband drinks. He just doesn't drink a lot. I always thought he drank a lot. And then when I quit drinking, I realized, oh no, I was leading the party. Like it was always me going like, let's open another bottle of wine. Like he's never one time, well, he never overdrank even when we were together, except for a couple of times with me on vacation. And that was with me going like, let's do shots.
Yeah.
And then that was the only time he was ever like felt sick the next day. Whereas I was regularly hungover. And I just assumed that I was with a guy who drank the way I did. No, he doesn't. He's one of those people which gives like, oh, I forgot to eat vibes, where he'll just be like, I haven't had a drink in like 2 weeks. And I'll go, why not? He's like, I just forgot. I haven't bought any. And then I'm like, hey, fuck off.
Yeah, I think about food all the time. Like while I'm eating lunch, I'm thinking about dinner. I love food. And like when people are like, oh yeah, it's 2:00. I forgot to eat today. I cannot relate.
Right.
And in the same way, if I see someone sitting at a bar and they leave a pint glass half full and they just leave, I'm just like, what are you doing? You're not going to finish that?
It's alcohol abuse.
It's alcohol abuse. Yeah.
It is that's alcohol abuse. There we go.
Okay, so what happened? So take us through like your first time, because obviously you had to have had some uncomfortable experiences to want to write it. We all know, I know, and you know that writing a book is freaking hard. So you have to feel really inspired.
And how long ago did you write the book?
Well, this is why this book is not a memoir, Stefanie. There's a reason that I did not write the Tawny Lara story. But it took me, it's such a weird answer, but like, I got the book deal in end of 2020, 21. And then, you find an agent. It's such a mess. It's so hard to really answer that question, because I'd been writing this book for years. I spent years writing it as a memoir. And then I realized I don't want to write a memoir. And then
too personal.
I workshopped it. And, if listeners have never been in a writing workshop, it's, people sitting in a circle reading their work, giving each other feedback, asking questions. It's very beneficial to the writing process. And people asked wonderful questions, and then it made me realize that I don't want to answer them. There's a lot that I want to keep to myself. I look at memoirists with the utmost respect, because like, y'all go there.
Yeah.
Y'all really, really go there.
I teach memoir writing actually. And exactly what you're saying. I do it over Zoom, but we take turns reading and people ask questions. And yeah, like you gotta get comfortable sharing pretty fast. So I can understand if that would be a deterrent to writing a memoir.
Very much. And, a lot of those chapters that I didn't turn into the book, they became, other essays that I published, or they became topics that I researched from a more journalistic perspective. The book has my story like as a little thread going through. Like you hear a little bit about my story, but it's more, I interviewed dozens of people, and doctors, therapists, mental health professionals, neurologists to learn about like the brain chemistry. And I also interview people who still drink. I interview people who are sober. I really wanted it to be just a comprehensive, like I said, investigation. But, you know, I had been writing as a freelancer. I had been writing about sober sex and dating for years before I got the book deal. So that's also why it's difficult to say how long did it take you to write the book, because I've been writing and researching about it for pretty much since I got sober. It really helped me learn how to date. You know, like being an annoying journalist helped me learn how to date, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but tell us about some of that early uncomfortable, awkward dating.
Yeah. So, you know, this is where the pleasure, advocating for your own pleasure part comes in. When I quit drinking, I also stopped faking orgasms. And that was not planned at all. My very first sober sex experience, it was, you know, I was hooking up with someone. We'd been on, you know, a few dates. And I told him, I was just like, I'm new to this. I've never hooked up without alcohol before. So I really need to take my time. And he was very patient, very kind. He was just like, yeah, do whatever, like, feel comfortable. We'll go as slow as you need to. Advocating for myself like that, I never did that when I drank, ever, ever, ever. I was usually in the bedroom. It was more performative. I was usually there for the other person, trying to perform for them.
I relate to that.
I mean, most women do, sadly, which is where the faking orgasms comes in. You know, like I didn't spend enough time thinking about my own pleasure, about my own body. So getting sober really gave me a chance to, you know, as corny as it sounds, like Stefanie could probably relate. It's like you meet yourself for the first time. And so there's a lot to say there, but, you know, sexually dealing with body image issues, dealing with some of my sexual hangups, dealing with some PTSD, it was tough, you know, which is why I say I advocated for myself for the first time, because you know, when you get sober, you learn these tools, you learn how to set boundaries, you learn how to communicate. So I'm hooking up with this guy and we're going through, you know, like we're having a good time, we're going slow. And I get to this point where I'm like, this is usually the point where I want to fake an orgasm, but I don't want to do that anymore. And he was like, great. Don't do it.
You told him that?
Oh.
You said that?
I did.
You said this is the point where I would fake it?
Yes.
Oh
yes,
my
I
God,
did.
I love this conversation. So real. Yeah. And he was like, great, don't do it.
Yeah. He was like, please don't do that. Like, I want you to feel good. I want you to enjoy yourself. So I am so lucky that my first sober sexual experience was incredibly positive, incredibly patient and kind.
Did you come?
No. Hell no. Hell no. I was so in my head. I mean, and
of course.
And that's another thing. Like a lot of, you know,
I'm glad you didn't just fake it in the conversation.
Could you imagine if I talked about faking orgasms, but I lied about it? No. Like a lot of sex educators and sex writers right now, the conversation is really more about pleasure as opposed to being laser focused on climaxing. Because especially for women, climaxing can be incredibly difficult, especially when there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on, like
a list of chores in your head and grocery store, like and
you have kids,
anxiety.
And husband. There's so much going on. So there's a lot of conversation about just like really reeling it in, going back to the basics, rediscovering your body, asking yourself, what do I even want out of a sexual experience? What does pleasure mean to me? What does pleasure mean to my partner? You know, really having these conversations with yourself and with your partner. That's where the sex positive community is right now. It's way less orgasm focused because it puts pressure on us to fake, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Also, when you're dating, I feel like there's a thing where you feel the performative thing comes in where you're like, but I have to seem like just laying there and going like, yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen is not sexy. Like, you know, and we're so trained to want the guy to feel good, like he's pleasing us, that we're trying to please him to feel like he's pleasing us so that he'll want to see us again. and think that we're sexy. And, I think it's just way more common than people think.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so. And every time I talk about faking orgasms and being performative in the bedroom, whether it's, at a live event or on a podcast like this, like every woman in the audience is like waving, like
nodding,
frantically nodding, like, yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of confidence not to fake it, or a lot of vulnerability or bravery to just be like, yeah, but I love that you did that. Okay, so
that's amazing.
So go on. Oh, let's take a quick break first. I'm sorry. Okay, let's take a quick break. Okay, we're back. So
this is so interesting.
Yeah, so then what happened? So you're with this guy. So the first experience
guy sounds
is okay.
Awesome, by the way. What a great guy.
He was great. We dated for a few months, and he's not the man that I married. He married, but I really look on that first sober relationship with kindness, and it was a really beautiful relationship, and it didn't end badly. It just which is another thing. There's actually a chapter in my book about sober breakups. I learned in sobriety that breakups actually don't have to be this like really big dramatic thing. People can actually just split amicably and be friends. And it's hard. Not every relationship can do that, of course. But we communicated, and that, I think that was really beautiful. But I kept dating, and I also, when I got sober, I came out as bisexual and really, learned a lot more about what bisexuality means to me. And I met my now husband. I was 2 years sober. He and I were each 2 years sober.
Oh, wow.
We actually met. Oh. Yeah. So like we were each sober for a couple years, and then we found each other. So we have recovery in common, which is so, so special to me. But, in between, it was a lot of, I didn't date a lot. I dated I hated the apps. I hated the apps so much. People, when I was dating, they just wanted to talk about sobriety. And I was like, God, there's like so much else I want to talk about.
Right.
Like, I'm so much more than this. Cause it's like, when you're setting up an online dating profile, like another chapter in my book is like how to set up your dating profile when you're sober or sober curious, is like, do I put it on my profile? Do I wait until we meet IRL? Do I wait until we're DMing? And I really break apart all these the pros and cons of each approach, so the reader can figure out what feels best for them.
It's so crazy that being sober is such a big deal. It's like, it's like really saying that you have kids from a previous, you know what I mean? That you're like a single mom or something. Right. It's like, it's some kind of, that being sober is some kind of baggage. It's so crazy.
It is. And what's interesting is that everyone has baggage
in the dating world, especially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much. And it's, we all have baggage. And I think when someone is upfront and self-aware of their baggage, it can be intimidating for the person who is not there. Then they feel like they need to explain why they drink to you. They need to explain this. And I dealt with that, and it was so freaking annoying. But I was single for a lot of time too. I think, I called it, the first chapter of my book is called Dating Yourself. And I spent a lot of time getting to know me, getting to know my body, getting to know what I want in a relationship, what I bring to the table, what I want someone else to bring to the table, learning different ways to explore my own body. So when I do have a partner, sex can be better because I'm not performing anymore. So it's like, I think, even if you get sober when you're in a relationship, I think you still need to do a lot of solo time, dating yourself, whatever that means to you. But really figuring out who you are as a sexual being without alcohol is crucial.
Right. Wow. It's really interesting, I mean, especially coming from somebody that's been married for so long and, didn't really drink that much. I mean, once in a while, but like didn't have to get drunk to get, intimate or whatever. But now like you're single and it's like going on a date. It's like, of course, everybody's going to have a glass of something, glass of wine or martini, something like it's just normal. You know what I mean? When you were like getting to know yourself and doing like self-help things, what were some of the things? Did you had therapy? Did you do yoga or did you you just went straight to work and just worked and kind of like tell us some of the things.
All of the above. Mm-hmm. all of the above. Yoga's been a big part of my life for a while, actually. And my yoga practice got a lot deeper when I quit drinking. Yoga and meditation. Yeah. Yeah. That's like once you've really transcended, it's just meditation. Yeah. I actually did yoga teacher training.
Oh.
I went to Bali for a month and I did yoga teacher training. I took a lot of writing classes. I studied improv. I studied Spanish. Like when you quit drinking, you A, have a lot more money and B, have a lot more time. So I filled my time. I was a brand new New Yorker who was just like, it was like a playground for me. I was like, I just explored and I played and I met really interesting people and, and I was writing throughout it. So I was living my normal life and some of it I wrote about. And, while you're living your life, you meet people. Sometimes they become dates. Sometimes they become friends. Sometimes they're just someone you take a class with. But I was really worried about like, how am I even going to make friends without alcohol?
Right.
And you meet friends in yoga, you meet friends in Spanish, you meet friends when you're engaging in a hobby or some sort of creative activity.
Right.
How did you meet your podcast partner?
Instagram.
Really?
Yeah.
Was her book out before yours?
Yeah, her book came out in 2016.
Okay.
So, and I got sober in 2015. So, sober Instagram during that time, there was only like a handful of us. It is nothing like it is now. And so she and I followed each other. And then I saw that she was doing, she had a reading and a book signing. And it was coming up. It was on my first, I say birthday, my sober birthday. She was doing a reading and book signing on my first birthday. And I commented on her post and I was like, I'm going to come to your event. This is how I'm going to celebrate. And so I came and then she gave me the biggest hug and she gave me her 1 year chip from AA.
Aww.
Which, like, again, we had never met before. We were just Instagram friends and, I still have it. She's, Lisa is, I just cry when I think about her. She's just such a fabulous person. Her book is about getting sober as a New York City high-powered lawyer, living that alcoholic, cocaine, working 24/7 life.
Right. Her story is a bit different than yours.
Her story, and she had to go to medical assisted detox. Like it was a very different story, which is, I think, why our friendship and our podcast works so well, because we're coming to the recovery conversation from two very different perspectives, but it shows that there's no one way to get sober or sober curious, So she's just been a true mentor to me. She was there every step of the way, helping me, reading early chapters of the book.
Oh, wow.
So she's incredible. I truly don't know where I would be without her.
And by the way, for our listeners, she was going to do the podcast as well. She was going to be on with Tawny, but I neglected to send any sort of confirmation email. Oh. You know me, you guys have met me until like yesterday. And I was like, hey, you guys still coming? I'm going to send you over the link. And she was like, oh, I'm giving a talk at a law school or something. I was like,
yeah,
okay. you're way more important than me. But
this is what she does now. She speaks at law schools and law firms. She speaks about addiction and mental health in the legal profession.
Wow.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's probably very needed. I bet you a lot of lawyers are alcoholics, just in the same way that people in the medical field, right? A lot of doctors, a lot of law enforcement.
Oh yeah, there's
these high pressure,
so much pressure, and so much work that and stressful work. Very, very stressful work. That people start self-medicating in law school. So, she's literally traveling the country and doing these talks on Zoom, talking to either law firms or law schools, just sharing her story, holding space for people to ask questions. And yeah, she's really doing great work.
My only issue with that is I feel like you'd have to wear dress up a lot for that. I like doing jobs that I can do from my couch.
Yeah. Yoga pants.
In sweats. Yeah, or yoga pants. Like, I feel like we've all achieved that.
So tell us about the podcast. Do you guys do it once a week, twice a week?
Yeah, so our podcast is called Recovery Rocks. We talk about recovery and rock and roll. And
I love that.
Yeah, thank you. So that's what we bonded over is we were both in recovery and we were both obsessed with rock and roll. So we were trying to come up with names for our podcast and just Recovery Rocks.
That's awesome.
So it's a perfect name.
And so is Dry Humping. Dry Humping's a great name. Great name.
I am very, very proud of that book title. It's people are like, how did you come up with that title? I'm like, I don't know. It makes sense. I love wordplay. I love puns. I mean, when I told you when I turned 30 and I started a blog to hold myself accountable, that blog was called Sobriety Party.
Ooh, I love that.
I just like words so much. So yeah, we just, the podcast is really fun. It's every Friday, 30-minute episodes, where we talk about just regular, just life in recovery, whether it's like setting boundaries or dating or, how to avoid alcohol when you're at a work event or a holiday party. And we have guests, Stephanie's been on and then each episode ends with us talking about music for a few minutes.
Oh, I love that.
You can imagine how that went with me though.
Yeah, I know. You Kenny Loggins.
I was so embarrassed. I was like, well, I'm not really a rock and roller. I think I was wearing a t-shirt with some band
you were wearing
on it,
a band
and I was like, this is very misleading. I mean, I do like I think I might have been wearing Run DMC or AC/DC, or even Led Zeppelin, but I was like, that's not the greatest representation of me. I'm more Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald.
Right.
But they did not shame me.
That's good.
Never. Oh my God. No. As someone who is very sex positive, we have this saying, don't yuck someone else's yum. And I apply that to music as well. I would never judge anyone's music choices.
I want to hear something like, and you can not answer if you don't want to, but did you come up against when you were just getting back to the Dry Humping? By the way, really quick, did you get any pushback on the title? I find that book companies, were they like, no, we're not going to go with that. It's going to be off-putting.
There was some concern that some people wouldn't get the title, that some people wouldn't get the pun.
Right.
And my editor, bless her, she really fought to keep it. So that title is why I had agents interested. It's why I had my editor instantly was like, we need this book, So, and also, as titles are always subject to change. Always. So I knew that I couldn't be married to the title because Barnes and Noble could be like, we're not going to carry a book called Dry Humping. and then we'd have to change it.
Right.
So,
right.
But I'm very, very grateful that the very few titles actually stay the same from conception to publish. And so I'm so grateful that that one got to stay.
Mine was originally called High Bottom Girls. Speaking of like musical. Yeah.
Yes, I love that.
Oh, they hated it. Yeah. Well, they all went with it. That's how I sold the book. And they were all like, yeah, great. And then as I think it was after I turned in the book, they were like, so we want to change the title. And I was like, why? This is like, I was married to this title. I was like, this is the book. And they were like, we don't think people are going to get it. And I said, well, then it just needs a good subtitle. Like, you know, the subtitle, like High Bottom Girls, a journey from functional to like falling down drunk or something, right? That was actually could have been a good subtitle. I just came up with that on the spot. You're welcome. But they were like, no. So there was not a lot I could do. And my editor was like, I'm sorry. But when the sales team is just saying no, it's just a no. So you have to come up with something else. And I was like, and then she was coming up with titles that were not great. Like, you know,
that's what they
relax
always do,
and don't drink or whatever. Right. And I was like, I don't want to bag on my editor because I love her. And she was probably just feeling under the gun. But one of the chapters was called like, do I have to quit or can I just cut down? And she was like, that would be a good title for your book. And I was like, no, it wouldn't at all. That would be a terrible title for the book. But I couldn't say that. But I was like, I'm kind of thinking something with a little more personality, like that's kind of a play on words or, you know, fun and she was like, okay, well, and I started making a list and then I just threw Drunkish out there. I wasn't even at all thinking it was a great title. And she was like, oh, I love that. And then she came back and she was like, everybody loves Drunkish. We're going with Drunkish. And I was like,
that sucks.
Are you sure you don't want High Bottom Girls? And she was like, I'm sorry. It's definitely a no. I was so sad, but now I'm happy.
It's funny because there's also, I'm sure you know, there's a book called Soberish that came out last year too.
I did not even know that.
So I feel like you guys need to do an event together.
Oh no, I did not know that. I literally didn't. I mean, I think I looked up Drunkish and knew there was.
Should have known. Like well,
it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But I mean, it would matter if it was like I was calling a podcast that and it had the same title.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so funny. Okay, so should we take another quick break, Kaylin? Yeah. Okay, let's take a break. Okay, so I want to know, as a sober woman, early on in your dating experience, did you find that like, and I don't know what you were like when you were drinking, but if you were hooking up and like party girl and bartender, I mean, I remember, I'll speak for myself. I remember when I was drinking a lot, early days working at restaurants, I had sex with my restaurant manager like on the floor in the kitchen after closing time. I was doing crazy, fun stuff. That would have been so far out of my comfort zone, sober. And I'm wondering if you came upon any like where you were with a guy that wanted to like do something more crazy that you came up against your own like, oh gosh, that's so uncomfortable.
No, I love this question, and I also slept with managers. I think that's a rite of passage.
Of course.
That is a party girl rite of passage. If you work in restaurants and you drink till you black out, you're going to hook up with coworkers and probably a manager.
Yeah.
So I totally hear that. I love this question because, you know, I did not have any standards when I was living my drunk life. I like sex and dating, like I was like, if you had a pulse and you gave me attention and validation, like it's on, you know, like I just was so starved for attention. And I lived a very, very reckless life back then. And once I got sober, I really became more mindful with people that I brought into my orbit, whether it's friends, hookups, dates, whatever. So I didn't do a lot of, I didn't have a lot of like sober hookups. You know what I mean? Like I've had a few, but since I've been sober, I've only slept with people that
you liked,
that I wanted, that respected me.
You.
I know that's kind of a boring answer, but
well, how did you meet your husband?
We met in an AA meeting.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
Yeah, and it's funny because AA is not part of my story at all. Like, I've been to a handful of meetings, but I went to the one I needed to go to, and we met, and we knew very early on that we were I don't know if we knew we were the one for each other, but I was like, this is about to be real. This is about to be a really big relationship in my life, you know?
Yeah.
And we got married last year, and
congratulations.
Wow.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm obsessed with him. He's amazing.
That's great.
Aw.
That's nice.
I just know that that's nice. I just know that when I got sober, there were certain things even within my marriage that I was like, okay, we can do that, but I need to be drunk. You know, that then it was like, oh shit, now I'm sober. Like, I'm like, not that necessarily I enjoyed some of those things, but it was just like, okay, I don't mind getting a little crazy. Like, if I'm drunk, and I would tell him, but I need to be kind of drunk for that, you know? And then I was sober, and it was like, now I have to really, I don't know if it's fear or just like, I have to respect like what my actual boundaries. I'm not talking anything really crazy, but you know, that I am a little more prude. I'm definitely more prude. And, you know, luckily my husband is like very sweet and like cool, and we still obviously enjoy each other. But I'm just saying that was, I feel,
it must have been a readjustment for things.
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
You get used to being buzzed or drunk for certain things, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, now what?
Now what? Exactly. Now what?
Now what?
And I think that women who are already in relationships, because I wrote about this a little bit in my book, just about how at least if you're single, you can just go like, well, I'm not going to do that right now. Like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to have sex now that I'm sober. I need to take some time and figure out what I want. But if you're married, it's like a little bit tough for your significant other, your spouse, to be like, oh, we're just not having sex now because you've decided that like you're not comfortable. You know what I mean? Like, you sort of have to figure it out a little quicker, I think. And I think that a book, I think it's really important for people, whether they're in a relationship or freshly out of a relationship or dates already were single, to have this book. Like, I think it probably appeals to people in relationships as well.
Very much so. It's, you know, it's the last third of the book is all about, like, there's a chapter about how to fight correctly. You know, like there's a, you know, chapter about breakups. There's a chapter about like communication and setting boundaries and advocating for yourself. Because a lot of people think, well, like, okay, I found my person, like the work is done. And that is not the case. That's actually where a lot of the work begins. So, especially, you know, if you were already in a relationship and then you get sober, like you did, Stefanie, that's a whole other thing. You know, it really is. A lot of relationships don't survive after one person gets sober.
Oh, I know.
Because it's quite devastating to realize that the alcohol was the glue that held you guys together. And I've seen it a lot in my line of work, and especially if the person who's not sober feels it's usually because the person who's not sober feels threatened.
Exactly.
They know that they should probably cut back a little bit or stop drinking altogether. So seeing you living your best life as a sober curious person, it's going to cause some fights.
The other thing I've seen is the flip side of that is, let's say you have a pretty serious issue and your spouse is always on you, like you drink like an alcoholic, and then you quit, and then you realize, oh shit, my spouse actually has an issue. I have seen that where the person quits, and now that they're sober, they see their partner in a different light. It's like, oh, you know what? It wasn't just me. I was like the identified patient in this relationship, and you got to complain about, but now that I'm sober, you seem to drink an awful lot and check out, and now I'm having to do everything and always be the designated driver and like, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is also where a lot of codependency starts to pop up, because someone will get sober and then they'll think it's their fault, their responsibility to save their partner and like rescue them from their alcohol use, and we can't. You know, nobody could have saved me. I had to save myself. And I talk about this in the book, where I actually give some conversation starters for how to have those really uncomfortable conversations with, like, your drinking makes me feel uncomfortable. You know, you cannot diagnose someone as an alcoholic or a problem drinker. Like, they have to come to that on their own. But what you can do is set a boundary and advocate for yourself, saying, like, I don't feel safe around you when blank, or when you blank, it makes me feel this way. And if they continue to ignore your feelings, then that's when some really uncomfortable conversations start to arise.
Unfortunately, if you were having an issue with alcohol and then you quit, sometimes people feel really hypocritical, then turning around and going like, I think your drinking makes me uncomfortable. And then they're like, really, bitch? Because your drinking made me uncomfortable for a long time. And now suddenly you're sober and you're the alcohol police. Like, I think that happens to people. So 100%. I think it's about like, listen, you know, you have to forgive yourself for the way that you were before, and you've taken a positive step in cleaning up, and you still, even if you created a lot of damage, you still have a right to want to be with a sober partner or somebody who's not getting hammered and putting you in danger. You know, it's hard to, you have to get past the idea that like, well, now I have to just put up with whatever because I was drinking for so long. I think that's hard for people.
It's really hard for people. And I think it's the communication part that's really difficult. Is, you know, we were not taught how to communicate or advocate for ourselves. We had to learn those things on our own. So if you're in recovery and you're working some sort of program, and then you come home from a meeting and your spouse, you know, just is on their third beer and they're not doing, you know, that can really create a lot of tension. And I am not anti-alcohol. You know, a lot of people like yourself, you can be with someone who drinks because he respects you, you know, and you guys talk, you guys have conversations. Like, it's not easy, you know, and we're just talking about romantic relationships here, but like the friend element, the family element is also a big part of it. It's like, I figured out who my real friends are versus my drinking buddies. And that was really painful to go through.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, in summary, tell us all your stuff. Like, what are your socials? Where do we get this? I mean, I already know this stuff, but you know what I mean. Where do we get the book?
Yeah.
Anywhere books are sold. Go on Amazon, go on Barnes & Noble,
Yes.
But go ahead.
There's also an audiobook. If you would want me to read the book to you, you can get the audiobook. And I have a newsletter called Beyond Liquid Courage, where I write about just like life beyond sobriety, you know, like what life is like now that I'm just like a person who doesn't drink anymore. And my husband and I actually just launched a vinegar-based non-alcoholic beverage.
Ooh,
so nice.
That's called Parentheses, that came out 2 months ago. So, that's my full-time job now. Is the chief marketing. Yeah, I'm promoting our drink. So
that's exciting. So where do we find that? Does that have an Instagram?
Yeah, it does. You can just go to drinkparentheses.com or drink parentheses on Instagram. And it's my husband he was a sommelier. So he crafted this gorgeous vinegar-based botanical drink. And I obviously think it's delicious. But it's a technically 2 drinks. It's a before and an after. So it's like a NA aperitif digestif vibes.
Ooh.
So that's available online in a couple NA bottle shops and stuff like that. So
That's
buy
great.
Dry Humping and get a couple bottles of parentheses.
Nice.
And follow Tawny Lara on Instagram.
Yeah.
And they can follow the podcast, Recovery Rocks. And thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being so open and sharing with us today.
This has been really great. Thank you, Tawny.
really fun.
Thank you for having me. You guys are so fun.
Oh, good.
You were great.
Come back
So
again.
Please.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Oh.
You're a parent now.
Don't F it up.